Okay, ladies and gentlemen, very quickly, we have Sheela Reddy sitting there, and then she will be talking to Ambassador Raghavan, and the title is Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah. Now, a lot of people in North India are not that familiar with the story of Mrs. Jinnah. Mr. Jinnah, of course, everybody knows. Very briefly, in my youth, I used to travel to Bombay on work quite a bit, and at that time the Taj Mahal Hotel had only the old wing, not the new wing, and I don't know if Sheela recalls. They just introduced television in rooms, and the hotel channel, the Taj Mahal Hotel channel in the old wing used to keep a running tape on Mrs. Jinnah. Because she actually happened to stay in that old wing. I think that will come out in your book. And we've already had talks on the Parsis. Well, here was another Parsi, Mrs. Jinnah, who came out to stay in the Taj old wing. And the hotel also used to keep a little tract, a folder on the life of Mrs. Jinnah staying in that wing. But more about that from Sheela and Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to discuss a fabulous new book. The title is Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah, and the author is Sheela Reddy. Now, this is a wonderful book because it's a love story, and like all love stories, it's riveting reading. But like some love stories, it's also a love story which ends in a tragedy. This is the story of Muhammad Ali Jinnah and his marriage to Mrs. Rati Jinnah. He was in his early 40s when they got married. She was a teenager. But the book is also about many other things, because this is a love story at the intersection of a very important time or period of Indian politics, roughly between 1915 and 1930, when Muhammad Ali Jinnah was easily, possibly the most prominent politician in India then. This is at the beginning, before the beginning of the Gandhian phase of the freedom movement. The older generation, Tilak, Gokhale, were then either on their way out or were no longer there. So Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the most prominent face of Indian politics at that time, and his marriage to a girl from easily the most important and wealthy Parsi family of India created waves. So part of the book is about those waves, about what happened to the Parsis, how did the Muslim community or the Khoja community to which Jinnah belonged reacted, the intersection of their lives with the Hindu Muslim issue, but also as their marriage progresses and it deteriorates, it's also the story of Jinnah's marginalization because of the beginning of Gandhian politics from the Indian national movement, and the consequences of which were felt 15 years later in the 1930s and 1940s. So it's a love story in the middle of a great deal of political activity and political churning, and I recommend it very, very strongly to you for you to read and delight in. So, Sheela, what made you write the book? What was it that interested you in Jinnah or in Mrs. Jinnah, in Rati, as a teenager deciding to marry Muhammad Ali Jinnah, this very prominent politician of India in his early 40s?
First of all, I want to say how happy I am to be in Kasauli. This is a place where I used to come quite often when Kushwant was there, and I feel so good to be here and to see this festival, which would have meant a lot to him if he was here. About why I wrote the book, I think it was because here was a guy who was as important to us as Gandhi. Jinnah is somebody we are all obsessed with on both sides of the border. but he's always been a cardboard figure, both sides of the border. There he's valorized, here he's villainized. And it sort of became a challenge to me, and I wanted to study modern Indian history, which I knew nothing about. So I thought, what a great way of approaching it. Here's a guy who's also very reluctant to reveal his personal side. And he seemed like a very interesting chap. So I thought, let me go and see who he's all about. But when I started finding out a little bit about him, I was continually surprised by the kind of response he used to get from people who knew him. And the myth-making about him being this stubborn miser who's very difficult to deal with, and all that came much later. And almost all his friends in Bombay who have left any anecdotes about him or any memoirs about him talk very highly about this man. So I became interested in studying about that. And then, but I didn't make much progress on the marriage part. I thought marriage, I just wanted to focus on the marriage because I knew so little about the politics of that time. And when I started studying the marriage, there was almost nothing available. You know, people just sort of left it a lot of gray area in it. They said, oh, here was a guy who fell in love with somebody who was 24 years his junior, then he got married to her, and then it raised a storm, and then they were very loving to each other, but they got separated a year before she died, and then she died, but then he was heartbroken, and after he became heartbroken, he got transformed. But nobody sort of actually talked about what happened. And possibly, I think there were only 2 books available after I dug and dug. There was one which was like a compendium of articles that had appeared on Rati Jinnah, and the other was a kind of fiction. And both were from Pakistan, so they were very heavily censored, and they painted a very strange picture. You know, she was both a wonderful wife as well as she left him. They got along beautifully, but they split up. So I just couldn't make sense of it. And I thought it's going to remain in the domain of one of those unanswered questions, except it was my great good luck to suddenly come across a whole bunch of correspondence left by a family that was amazingly productive in correspondence. This was the Naidu family, Sarojini Naidu, her 4 children, her husband, and all these people, because it was a very modern family, split up all over the world, so they used to write to each other almost every day. And by some great good fortune, Rati happened to be a very close friend of Sarojini Naidu, so there was almost a daily mention of Rati in those letters, and her concerns and what was happening in her household and so on. So I got a very good picture of what was happening. But it was still not good enough, because even after knowing all that, it's like politics is a sultan in the marriage. And so in order to understand the marriage, I had to go into the politics. I went very reluctantly because I didn't know anything about it. Again, I was astounded at what binaries had come about in the way we had interpreted what had happened in those crucial years, as you said.
Well, it's a wonderful read, and the politics aside, I'll come to the politics. But when you start reading about the Jinnah-Rati relationship, the initial courting, and then he falls in love, goes to the father, Sir Dinshaw Petit, and asks to marry his daughter. The father, of course, won't hear of it. But by then you know sufficient about both the characters, and you've really fleshed them out beautifully. But you know from then, very early on, that this is a marriage made in hell. It has no chance of surviving, because when it started coming apart, you find by then they have a daughter, but Rati Jinnah goes away for months, I think for a month and a half at one stage to Hyderabad, taking her dogs with her, but leaving the daughter behind. So what do you make of Rati Jinnah? How do you read her?
Yeah, I think she was, of course, very young, but she was extraordinarily mature for her years. She was only 14 when she fell in love with Jinnah. And if some things had happened, say, like she had, if there was no war, and if her parents had their way and sent her off to Oxford or something to study after her senior Cambridge, maybe this marriage might not have been fated to happen. But the way the whole thing happened is it seemed so inevitable, because here was a person who was brought up to believe that she could marry whoever she wanted to, that it didn't matter about community or religion or anything. That was the ambience in which they were living. It's sort of a fool's world almost, but everybody believed that it was possible to be Indian first and then belong to the community. And there were many other youngsters also attempting these things, except those were children of parents, perhaps, who, like Vijayalakshmi Pandit, whose father was able to get a handle on her. Rati had been brought up to be so independent and autonomous that it was not possible for her father to deal with her and say, and just sort of say, no, you can't marry this man. Because even after he put down his foot and said, you can't marry this man, she was still meeting him, which panicked him, and he did something very foolish. He put a case of abduction against Jinnah. Instead of persuading his daughter, he went and put a case of abduction against Jinnah. And so Jinnah just kept out of it until Rati was of a legal age. And then she just left her father's house with nothing but her dog under her arm and walked out. And she sort of, she was the one who said in court that when she was being charged about abduction, that, Your Honor, it was not him who abducted me, it was me who abducted him.
I abducted him, yes. Yes. You see, one of the reasons why this session is also very timely, because yesterday we had the opportunity of talking about Kasturba Gandhi, and it's a wonderful idea also to explore Mahatma Gandhi's personal life, what's and all. And this morning we heard a little bit about Indira Gandhi and her relationship with her mother and her father. And today we have and to complete this triad, today you have Muhammad Ali Jinnah, because between the three of them, they really encapsulate the history of the 20th century. I think when you're evaluating icons, it's very difficult.
Yes.
And particularly a figure like Jinnah, because the impression many people have of him is that of the Jinnah film, Richard Attenborough. But how do you evaluate Jinnah, especially 1915 to 1930?
Yeah. Seen in the marriage, I think he was a good enough husband. It was just that all the circumstances seemed against them. It was, here was a girl who was severely excommunicated from her community, and she was left without a single family to support her or any friends. At such a situation, she needed a husband who was available to her, who could be a support. In a situation like that, your marriage can either sort of draw you very close together or break you up. It just so happened that it was also the time when Jinnah was getting isolated in his political career. And that was also very important to him. He had to, at exactly the year he got married, he was facing a challenge from Gandhi. These were huge challenges for his political career. In order to keep a toehold over a political career he had striven for so many years for, he had to do something immediately, and he could pay no attention to his wife at a time when she needed him most. But to come back to the question of how do I see Jinnah, he continually surprised me. I came to it with only a school textbook idea of who he could be, or as you said, from films, as you know, this sort of dry stick of a man, and he's such a cardboard cutout of a thing. I mean, he has no life in him at all. But when I started reading about him, he very quickly fleshed himself out as a person who was extremely independent, somebody who actually did a very remarkable thing. He rose from nowhere, and in the course of a single decade, I think, made it to the top of his profession in a very competitive field. I think he would possibly be only the first or second Muslim barrister to own a house in Malabar Hills. It was a very Hindu-dominated profession at that time. And he made it entirely on his own. He was the epitome of a self-made man. And he was a proud man. He had huge integrity. He was not a person who could be bought over by anybody. The British tried so hard to buy him over with knighthoods and other plums of office, but he was completely unpurchasable. And then the most surprising thing was, he was such a loyal friend. If there was a friend, he came sort of at one end of the thing. He was this sort of very proud man who called himself, you know, I'm a Mercedes of a lawyer. I won't accept any fees less than 1,500 rupees, which was an enormous sum at that time. And he would say stuff like that. But if he earned a case and some grateful client said, you know, you keep the rest of the money, he would return it saying, no, I don't want money I have not earned. So he was a very interesting character.
Well, it's interesting. In Pakistan, Jinnah as a personality is rarely evaluated. He's just an icon, and he's the father of the nation and so on. In India, he's the father of the two-nation theory, and revisionism about Jinnah has always been a dangerous thing in India. Mr. Jaswant Singh wrote a book about Jinnah and then was expelled from the BJP. Mr. Advani, when he went to Karachi, wrote something in Jinnah's mausoleum and had to pay quite a heavy price for it. But I think it's good if we reevaluate Jinnah as a human being and as a person, and you really added a great deal of flesh and blood to him. But to pose a counterfactual, although counterfactuals are not good, but to pose a counterfactual, do you think the marriage could have been saved? Was it possible for Jinnah, being the man that he was, or for Rati going off on holidays, leaving a child behind, but taking her dogs?
Yeah.
Was there something in their DNAs which could have made it possible to bridge?
Certainly not. That was a marriage doomed to failure. But I think what was tragic about that marriage is she knew almost at once that she had made a huge mistake, but she somehow could not pull herself away from him. It was like such a bad dependence on each other. It just totally destroyed both of them. I mean, it's not a new thing or an old thing. I'm sure women still do it. They stick on to a marriage because they think the man needs them, and you know, oh, he has such a huge political career and I'm necessary for his political career. And in the process, they destroy both themselves and the man. I think she would have done him a favor if within 6 months of a marriage, when she found out that it was not for her to say, oops, I made a mistake, sorry, let's go away.
Both tried. Two very dramatic situations which you describe in the book. One is when Jinnah is leading a protest against a memorial to be given to Lord Wellington, the governor of Bombay, and how she also went there and then couldn't enter and so on. But even more dramatic, and this is it's one of those turning points in Indian history, is when Jinnah is marginalized and almost humiliated, or perhaps actually humiliated, by Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru at the Khilafat conference. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rati Jinnah was there, but then the Congress objected to her presence, saying that she was improperly dressed. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. So it began with, I guess all of you are familiar with Gandhi's sort of deciding to unite the Hindus and Muslims, and he picked the Khilafat cause, which was, they were fighting for the Caliph who had been on the wrong side of First World War, and the Muslims, because he was their spiritual head, were very much on the side of the Caliph. So in order to get the Muslims on the side of the freedom struggle, Gandhi decided to take up the cause of the Khilafat. Jinnah was, not just Jinnah, but almost every Congress leader was opposed to the style of agitation he was suggesting for this new civil disobedience that he was starting. And this was that you have no cooperation at all with the government in any way. So you leave, all kids had to leave government-run schools. They had to go to only national schools, and there were no national schools, which meant that you just raised a generation of rowdies, illiterate rowdies. And then all the lawyers, and the Congress was only full of lawyers, had to leave their jobs because, it involved getting money from government courts. So everybody was opposed to it. But Jinnah, being who he was the only one who had the temperament to actually question Gandhi about this. The others were like, they were intimidated by the kind of popularity Gandhi had. He was like this cult figure. He was huge. Wherever he went, they'd stop the train and they wanted a glimpse of him. And, he was equated with a god. So every politician thought it was much more politic to just agree with him on the surface because he was too big to be resisted. But here was a man who was very stubborn and very honest, ruthlessly honest. So he stood up during the national session that was going on in Nagpur, and he opposed single-handedly in a Congress that was filled with Muslims and Hindus who were rooting for this political measure that Gandhi was suggesting. He stood up and he said, no, I think you're going the wrong way, you can't do this. And he was booed out of it. And he was not just booed out, but he came to blows with Muhammad Ali and so on. Gandhi and Nehru and the other leaders just stood by and watched while Jinnah was being humiliated by their followers. And he had to walk out. He must have been very shaken. It was ultimately a British observer who was at that session who finally stood up and protested that you can't treat a political opponent the way you all are treating him. So it was a bad situation. And then there was Rati. She was sitting there and she was taking the whole hostility of the crowd on herself. She had come to that Congress dressed in what for her were normal clothes, which was that she didn't wear khadi. She was wearing a sari with a sleeveless blouse. And then a chit was passed to the president saying that we object to her dress. So Jinnah, who was too busy fighting too many battles, didn't want to take up something as trivial as her dress. So he just passed the chit to her and she had to leave.
Well, Jinnah's, the gulf between Jinnah and Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru and the rest of the Congress only grows after this, and the rest, as they say, is history, because the Muslim League and the Congress, the polarization crystallizes after a few years. But the interesting thing, of course, is that all this is taking place. Jinnah's own drift into marginality while his own marriage is breaking down. And as you say, nothing could have been done to save the marriage. But what I found somewhat disturbing is that, of course, Rati Jinnah was cut off from her milieu. Her parents weren't seeing her. The rest of the Parsi community had ostracized her. But her closest friends were Sarojini Naidu and her daughters. But they also appeared to be only observers. And after she died, and we'll come to that, after she died, I think Sarojini Naidu, you quote Sarojini Naidu as saying that she did not have the power to cling on to life, which is almost merciless in a way, isn't it?
Did I say?
Something, Sarojini Naidu says that she didn't have the power to stay on.
In the sense that I think it was tragic in the way she attempted to leave him 3-4 times. And each time she came back, even the last time when she separated from him, Jinnah was trying till her last breath to get her back into the house. He would visit her every day at wherever she stayed. Some people said she spent her last days at the Taj, but from whatever little evidence I could gather, it could possibly be a house that was loaned to her by her brother. And he would visit every day while he was there, but he completely could not see her for what she was. She was just somebody he depended on, and he needed for him to, to go out and shine in the world and so on. But he never really saw her for what she was. And after she died, if you remember, I have a quotation from him confessing to Mrs. Liaquat Ali that I should have never married her. She was a child, So he understood it perhaps too late. There were, all through, I feel, here were two tragic figures who had deeply loved and committed to each other, and everything was against them. She says in her last letter also, I mean, if I had loved you less, maybe I would have stayed. But she was a romantic. She wanted to lead a life a different way. She had a whole image of herself as somebody who was free and liberated, and who went abroad, and who wrote books, and she attempted poetry. She attempted various kinds of art.
Did she commit suicide, or was it an accidental overdose?
This is the mysterious thing, because of course we have no evidence at all. It looks like there was some official thing put out by the parents. From Sarojini Naidu's letters, it appears that they put out a thing that she had died a natural death of peptic ulcer or something like that. But she also leaves behind, Sarojini Naidu has left letters saying she has met people who said that she had died of a drug overdose. And the most interesting thing was, this I discovered when I went to Pakistan. There was a Pakistani memoirist who came to India and met this guy called Kanji Dwarkadas, who I think none of us have heard of, but he's a big figure in Pakistan. Every historian in Pakistan knows him. He's sort of, everywhere I went, people would ask me, do you have Kanji Dwarkadas's number? Can I get in touch with Kanji Dwarkadas's family and so on? So this guy was at the end of Jinnah's life in India, he remained his only friend who stayed in India, and he was in Bombay, and he was a very close friend of Rati's as well. So he was the one who was witness to Rati's last days. In fact, Jinnah had to call Kanji Dwarkadas home after the funeral to find out what had happened to Rati, because he had been in Delhi at that time, attending the assembly, and he had no clue what was going on with Rati. Although he was so devastated afterwards that she had died. I mean, it was more like, oh, you ditched me kind of thing. It was nothing to do with whether he, there are all kinds of love. This Kanji Dwarkadas gave an interview to a visiting Pakistani memoirist, saying that very clearly, he said that she died of taking an overdose of sleeping pills, and she did it on her 29th birthday. So clearly it was a suicide which the family had hushed up.
And of course the tragedy of Muhammad Ali Jinnah's life is that about 15 years later, more or less the same situation repeats itself with his daughter, Dina, when she decides to marry a Parsi. And shortly after that, Jinnah and Fatima Jinnah go to Pakistan, and Dina Wadia stays back in India. It's quite a tragic story, quite apart from what happens in Pakistan itself and the communal riots. But to return just very briefly to Jinnah in Indian politics between 1915 and 1930, and you explained what happens as the Khilafat movement gathers steam. I was struck by the similarity of Subhash Chandra Bose's treatment by Mahatma Gandhi in the Congress and Muhammad Ali Jinnah's. Do you agree? Do you think there's some overlap in terms of how two very charismatic, important leaders, their political platform is taken away from them, and they're really then driven into the wild?
I don't, I have a sneaking affection or devotion or something to Gandhi, and I admire this man, I idolize him. I feel that he was a guy who made a mistake with the Khilafat, certainly. But he had the greatness of soul when he decided that he had made a mistake to totally give it all up and walk into the wilderness again. He retreated into his ashram at a time when they were nearly winning that particular electoral strategy that he had formed. He had almost won it, and everybody was shocked why he had withdrawn it just because of a small incidence of violence. But I think he was realizing in his mind that he had made a terrible mistake and that he had unleashed all these forces which Jinnah had been warning him that, you're going to raise something that you won't be able to control, so you should not mix religion with politics. And I think Gandhi realized that, but he had the greatness of soul to walk into the thing. Jinnah, after protesting so much later followed the same example. He rose, his second rise to power was on exactly the same formula that he thought that Gandhi was using, which is mix. Our nation is in trouble, or Muslims are in trouble kind of slogan, in order to become a leader. And then he couldn't withdraw because he was too attached to power. So I don't see it like, Gandhi is this villain and Jinnah is this hero. I can't make that binary between them. I think both of them were very complex and very unpurchasable people, amazing people, both of them. But the tragedy, I think, for all of us was that here was a man who could only work with with somebody who trusted him completely. That was Gandhi. He could not work with anybody who didn't trust him or doubted his motives. He just clammed up and became a different man. And then on the other side was Jinnah, who couldn't trust anybody for his life. He couldn't trust his own wife, let alone a political opponent. So in the process, we all got screwed.
Well, do read the book to make up your mind. As I said, revision is about Jinnah is difficult, but it's very good that the exercise has been done. So are there any questions? And I'm sure Mrs. Reddy would be happy to answer them.
Oh, 1 minute.
The front row.
Can I just ask one question? Was there any other man in Rathi's life, and was there any other woman in Jinnah's life that you found from your research?
Yeah, this is the Jinnah is you know, his first biographer called him irritatingly chaste. You know, he was so he just could not. He had no affairs at all. At a time when he was a bachelor in Bombay, the richest chap and all, there's not a whiff of scandal attached to him. When he was in England and girls made passes at him as they used to make to any bachelor who came from India, which is what all the mothers in India were worried about, he snubbed her in no uncertain terms. And then after he came back also, there was not a whiff of anything. The only time he really became interested in a woman was this 14-year-old, 14, 15-year-old. So, and after he died, there was some talk, I don't know if this is a myth or if it's true, but he was supposed to have been very attracted to Mrs. Liaquat Ali Khan. There's some incident that somebody told me, but I don't know how much of it is gossip and how much is, you know, just ordinary. I mean, we can't comprehend a person who's that celibate. So maybe we are just making up stories, I don't know. But the story goes that Liaquat Ali and his wife were trying to persuade Jinnah to get married again. And he said, find me a wife like yours and I'll marry at once. And the addition to that story is Fatima Jinnah walked in right then. And then, you know, you could hear a pin drop because, you know, she was jealous of any woman coming into his life. So I think Fatima was definitely very possessive about her brother. She did not encourage him to get emotionally close to any other woman after she took over his life. And that's understandable because she had been his only companion before Rathi came in. I mean, she had basically decided to devote her whole life to her brother's welfare. And suddenly at an age when she thought that she had him to herself for the rest of her life, he suddenly ups and says, sorry, I fell in love with somebody, I'm going to get married. Now you basically just bugger off. So after that, she was very, very possessive of him and wouldn't let any woman come near him. So even if he wanted to go, sort of get married, there was very little chance with Fatima in his environment. As for her, this was very interesting because when I went to Pakistan and I was looking for some sources of some personal information on Jinnah, and to my astonishment, I thought I'll just go to Pakistan and there it will be all laid out in the archives. I just have to copy those letters and come back to India and I can do my research here. But there was nothing available. There was nothing, not a single letter, nothing to do except with the Muslim League and politics and so on. And everybody was recommending, you go back to Bombay. That's where you'll find the material. Because he had lived most of his life in Bombay and that's where they thought the material would be available. But in my desperation to find something, I went to the Karachi University Library because I heard that Jinnah and Rati's personal collection of books was stored in one portion of the library. It's the entire collection of Jinnah and Rati's books are lying there. Now, almost the first book that I picked up had some notes. It had some notes from Rati. This was sort of, the book was about the time when she was 14, and this was a book, it was an autobiography of Emmeline Pankhurst, the suffragist, the English suffragist, and she had annotated it closely, with bravo and, oh, this is the way to go and that kind of thing. And it was like, you could see Rati breathing through it. So I spent most of that 1 month's visa that I had rooting through all the books in that Karachi library, looking for some hint of them speaking through the books. And to my great good luck, I find this biography of Napoleon's, owned by Jinnah. And in that biography, there is one paragraph which was like, I can't tell you how it was underlined. There were curly lines and squiggly lines and double lines and all that, so you couldn't miss it on the page. And this paragraph had to do with Napoleon discovering that his Empress Josephine had been in an affair. And he was in a dilemma about whether to accept her or to reject her. And he accepted her, but he was having problems coming to terms with it. And so Napoleon is saying to himself that, it's my fault that she had an affair with the other person, because a woman needs love and sex, and I wasn't able to give it to her, so it's okay if she went to the other man. And if I'm taking her back, then I have to accept this completely and not have any reservations about it. And this was a paragraph Jinnah had underlined many, many times. So obviously, all my antenna went up and I started looking for some signs. But Rati in her own way was as unself-revelatory as Jinnah. She writes hundreds of personal letters to her friends, but she gives away very little of her personal secrets in them. So it just seems to me that there was some strain at one point. It was a very short experiment, I think, and then she just gave it up. And I see it as somebody trying to get free of Jinnah,
I would like to ask questions to both of you. It's a fascinating book you've written, Sheela. I couldn't put it down. And as Manishankar Iyer said, it's certainly the best biography of the year, if not for the decade. But
regarded as Muslims. Khojas are. Khojas definitely are regarded as Muslims. No question on that. So they are not comparable to Ahmadiyyas at all.
I want to cop out of this question because my book ends at 1930, but until which time Jinnah was like a profound nationalist, and then he got tired of trying to find a voice for the Muslims, and then he goes into political exile, and then he comes back with a different plan of how to get Muslims their share of the pie as he conceived it in his head. Now, I feel that it took me, I think, more than 4.5 to 5 years to figure him out till now. I don't know how many years it will take me to figure out what happened after that, how did he change so to the other end of the spectrum. I had no clue.
Thank you very much. This is the book.
Right, quick two announcements. Number one, Sheela's book, as many of the other authors' books, are available in the bookshop as you go in through the door. First to the left is the bookshop. Number 2, if anybody finds a book which has been addressed to my dear friend Bachi, please return it. She is desperately missing that book. Somebody may have picked it up by accident, or she may have put it somewhere. It's addressed to Bachi, so please do return it either to me or to Bachi. Thank you, Ashok. Yes, of course, my fault. Have you found Bachi's book or no? Okay. Yes. Go to the next session, which will be the second last session for the day. And that was a surprise package, which was not listed earlier for very good reasons. So, may I welcome on the stage the big man himself. Vikram, would you like to come up? Well, I don't need to introduce Vikram, everybody knows him. And talking to him, the interlocutor, my dear friend Ashok. Please, Ashok, come.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great honor to have Vikram Seth out here with us. Vikram, we have waited for you for 6 fests before you said yes. And there's a little story behind this. About a month and a half back, Vikram, myself, and a very dear common friend of ours, we were on a Sunday afternoon sitting at his farm, and the 3 of us meet very often there regularly for a brunch of duck eggs omelette and toast with lots of vodka and a little bit of Coca-Cola for me. So I was just talking to Vikram, and I said about the KS Fest. You've never been there, why don't you come this time? I know you're very hard pressed for time, you're in the middle of your book. And he said, what dates? So I gave him the dates. He took out his telephone, put it in it, and then he said, okay, I will do it, I'll come. But only on one condition: you will not tell anyone. Simply because I don't know what will be Papa's condition at that stage, so I don't want to commit, and I don't know what will be the health of my manuscript at that stage. 2 days before the fest, and he rang me up and he said, yes, okay, time to take a decision, everything is okay, I'll be coming, but only on one condition, that we'll go together and I'll come back with you. So I said, okay, we'll drive up. And then he kept on saying, anything for Kushwant, I'll do it. Anything for Kushwant. 3rd time he said, yes, anything for Kushwant. And then I think as an afterthought he said, and anything for you also. So that's how Vikram is here, and we're so happy to have you here, because I'm sure Kushwant, wherever he is, he would be very happy to know that you are here at the fest today.
Thank you. And he'd be happier to know that I'd raised something to him, though not quite his favorite whiskey.
This is to Kushwant.
Ashok, the other day, when I was sitting on one of these sofas at the beginning, listening to something, turned to me and suddenly said, I'm so glad that you could make it despite the conditions. So I said, is that your attitude towards literature, Ashok, that you're glad that my writing isn't going well? So that, if I had been on the 13th line of a sonnet, or if I'd been at a crucial point of a suitable girl, I would have had to beg off, and Khushwant would have understood completely. But in a way, I'm not entirely unhappy that there's a little hiatus in my writing. I hope it won't last very long. And that I can be here at this really most beautiful of venues, pretty much of any festival that I've been in. This has had the most character and the most charm. And when I get bored of the offerings, I can always look at the sunset or the datura plants below, or wander off into the bar over here. I've never been to Kasauli before, and it is a great pleasure to be here and to be able to spend 5 or 6 days here, 4 or 5 days here, I should say, 5. We'll be driving back by a different route, I understand, and seeing that jail museum that was mentioned by Anand the other day. Yeah.
Vikram, how do you remember Khushwant's day?
Well, do you mean I should read the poem? Fine, okay. Well, they asked me to write an introduction to a book. Oh, you've got it, have you? Fantastic. Thanks. I wrote my computer along in case yeah. This is the one. I'm just reacquainting myself with it. Here we are. It just requires a little bit of an explanation. Khushwant, as many people know, was the godfather to hundreds of cats. Well, not hundreds, I'd say at least a score of cats. And what else? The last 3 lines refer to the fact that he wrote a wonderful, I wouldn't even call it a short story, would you call it a vignette? Really one of the very best pieces of short prose that I've read anywhere, which was a little homage to his grandmother and to the last day or days of her life. She was very fond of birds. I'm not sure how sparrows particularly. I'm not sure how the sparrows and the cats would have got along. But she was very fond of the sparrows, and she used to talk of them, you haven't eaten enough, etc., etc. And on the last day, she started chanting from some religious... it was from, but what exactly was it? Do you know the particular... No, okay. Oh, there's one odd thing about this poem, and that is the first line begins with the following letters. First line is K, next is H, then U, S, H, W, A, N, T, S, I, N, G, H. So it's an acrostic where Khushwant Singh is spelt out by the letters of every line at the beginning. So here's the poem, my little homage to Khushwant. King of the columnists and prince of hosts, hero of cats, 20 at least, who feed under your aegis, trenchman of toasts, Scotch naturally, not French. God knows we need humour and courage, tolerance and wit, when hope is scarce and murder's blessed by prayer. And every bully, oaf and hypocrite nurtures his flock on hatred and hot air. Threats to your life have not made you less bold. Success can't spoil you. May you scatter your words inimitably on for decades more, no less amused and generous than your old grandmother, standing by the courtyard door, halting her prayers to feed and chide the birds.
Vikram, that day when Khushwant passed away, that afternoon the family and some friends had assembled at his apartment in Sujan Singh Park. And Rahul was inside, so I had just gone to see if Dr. Manmohan Singh and his wife would come in. And I saw you and your mother coming in. And we went inside, you paid your homage and all, and then I brought your mother out and she sat down and asked you, Vikram, would you like to sit down? And you were talking to me about something, and you said, yes, I will. So I was trying to arrange a seat on that sofa opposite, and you said, no, I think I'll still sit at the feet of the master. And you went and that one seater on which Khushwant sat, read, wrote, drank, watched television, and also, like Raja Indra, sat on his throne and held his darbar every evening. And you just dragged a stool there, sat down next to him, and you kept on looking at the chair, and I was observing that. I just want to know, which I've never asked you before, I just want to know what was going on in your mind at that stage, at that particular moment.
Well, you know, I don't remember that event. I don't remember doing that. So I couldn't possibly recall what was in my mind. It was, of course I must have done that because you noticed that that's what I did, but I mean, I have no idea what I was thinking. But I always sat there. So it's quite a natural thing to do if you're saying your final goodbyes to someone whom you love, to just try to feel their presence in their own geography. Because you know the room is going to change after a while. And his body was in the next room, yeah, so I think he'd had the thing on his eyes, hadn't he? He donated his eyes, so...
He had donated his eyes and the doctor was already inside.
The doctor was inside, yeah. So I think I just sat there. I wish I could recall it. It's interesting, but I just can't remember what I was thinking.
Of all his works, because let's divide his works into three parts. One was his original fiction. I'm not talking about columns, because that was very... But his books, for example, and most of his books were recycled from the columns. But his original books, fiction, translations, and what you can call the religious studies, or the biographies, let's put it that way. Which one do you appeal the most? For example, for me, just the one you quoted about the sparrows, that's the portrait of a lady.
Portrait of a lady. That's the short story or vignette or whatever you like.
Which
Wonderful.
Which I would recommend to everybody who's not read that. There are many others. There's a collection of this collected short stories of Khushwant Singh, and I think that's one thing which is most underrated about Khushwant, because they're a wonderful set of stories. And Portrait of the Lady and the Brown Sahib are outstanding, absolutely. You know,
each in their way.
Each in their way. So for you, let's say fiction, which one do you consider, you know, the best for you?
I think it is that the story that I mentioned and incorporated here. I mean, it's only 3 or 4 pages long. It is absolutely a marvelous piece of writing, very moving and very clear and very unsentimental, so to speak, and yet ineffably, you know, really moving. And frankly, Khushwant was a friend. I haven't read a huge amount by him, I have to confess. And we became friends because in his Darbari, Farman-like way, he mentioned to my mother after I'd written The Golden Gate and he'd read it and said nice things about it, I want to meet your son. So, of course, you know, Maharaj yaad kar rahe hain aapki, so I had to make my way to Sujan Singh Park. And I'd heard of him, but I thought Khushwant might be a bit of a kind of, sort of jovial joker. But he was all that, but he was far from just that. And he became such a close friend. It was just nice, whether we were just one-on-one, or my mother and he and I were together, or it was part of a group of 4 or 5, or he had all his, I wouldn't call them gopis exactly, but his friends around him, or whether there was a wide group of people, some from Pakistan, some from elsewhere, poets and big diplomats and all sorts of things. It was, in every context with Khushwant, it was enjoyable to be there. Even if, and I know that this is quite rare, it was in silence, just sipping our scotch appreciatively. Unfortunately, I'm sure there are lots of vignettes that must have happened, but for me it was just like, I never thought that I'd be asked to talk about my friend. So, I'm not a very good raconteur, and I can't really remember much, except that I enjoyed his company hugely, and he enjoyed mine, because otherwise he wouldn't have given me this free pass, so to speak, to enter the...
Yes, he gave you the free pass, which Rahul did mention a little about that yesterday. Vikram was the only person, without exception, the only person who could enter Khushwant's house from the back door without taking an appointment.
But only between the hours of 7 and 8.
Well, what he told me was that in the mornings when I'm writing, Vikram is allowed to enter.
I didn't, let me put it this way, I didn't abuse my privilege.
That's very nice of you. The second thing I still remember, and Kushwant wrote about it when the Golden Gate came out. He wrote about the fact that, mark my words, Vikram is going to one day get the Nobel Prize.
Well, this is the thing that's always thrown at me. It is very generous of him to say that, and so early on in my writing. But, you know, I've never treated... When I first became, in my minor way, famous for the Golden Gate, and then The Suitable Boy was a bestseller, I enjoyed the little fizzy gulp of fame that I got. But quite soon thereafter, it became a little bit of a nuisance. And I didn't want to be recognized here and there. I wanted my privacy. And again, with prizes, I know they're, you know, I've got some. I haven't got others. I'm not concerned so much about that. And now my mother's died, I'm even less concerned about that. What I am concerned, what my greatest prize is, and I was telling this to someone yesterday, is if someone tells me that I've read your book, or मेरी नानी भी पढ़ी, ने भी पढ़ी है ये किताब, और मेरी माता जी नहीं है, मेरी बेटी भी पढ़ेगी. That kind of thing is the best prize for me. And in one particular case, I noticed that I'd gone into a room where a friend of mine was reading something, I couldn't tell what it was, and I said something to him, and he just shooed me out. I said, what's the matter? He said, I'm reading your book. At first I was rather taken aback and a bit offended, and then I realized it's a very high compliment. So these are prizes. So it is very nice of Kushwant to say this, but, and by the way, may I mention, the person who has actually got the Nobel Prize this year, Ishiguro, is a very fine writer, an extremely nice man as well, which doesn't always go together, and also, I will say this, he is someone who won't let his head be turned by a prize, as so often happens with people. Their writing is ruined after getting some very august prize, but that won't happen with Ishiguro. He's his own person and will write exactly what his muse inspires him to write.
Tell us, how do you personally handle success? Is it painful, like you said at times it is? Or
well, at first it's fun, right? And you can't believe it, that people want your opinion on all sorts of subjects that you know you have no competence to pronounce on. They think because you're a writer, you have some kind of direct connection to Zeus or Indra. You somehow know everything about the universe. No. First, you don't know everything. And secondly, your opinions are no more valuable than those of the next citizen. And third, you might not want to give your opinions on everything. So I try to keep out of that thing. And in fact, I don't normally, nowadays, now that I'm writing my book, A Suitable Girl, I don't attend festivals. However, I will say that festivals have learned a technique of bringing me there. What they do is, a couple of years ago, I hope I'm not telling tales out of school.
We all know about it. I better get it from your mouth. Yeah.
Okay, well, Bachi, who gave us such a wonderful, entertaining, how could you say, blood and guts and law presentation about the Nanavati case. Bachi invited me to Bombay. I said, Bachi, I'm sorry I'm not doing festivals. So she said, oh, but this is going to be very ungracious of you. We've decided to give you some lifetime something award, etc., etc. And so you have to come, otherwise people will think you're, you know, on your high horse. So I thought, well, I went to discuss this with my mother, and my mother said, you have to accept it. So off I went. Then 2 months afterwards, I can't remember, someone or the other, this was in Mehboob Studios, right? Mehboob Studios. Then there was another one, which was the Tata thing. This was the Times of India. They invited me and I said, look, I'm sorry, I can't go. They said, oh, it's a month and a half before, and please don't worry about it. Please do come. And also we've made you something of the year or something. Okay, so Majbooran, I decided, okay, I better accept it, get all the bloody festivals out of the way, and then get back to your book. What I did not realize was that there would be a little mini Mahabharat, or at least Mahamumbai, that would start up as a result of this. How could you accept that in this? I said, but they're like a month and a half apart. I didn't realize how jealously each one guarded their turf. So I wrote a little poem about that, but unfortunately I don't have a lapel mic, so you'll have to hold it.
I'll hold.
Actually, we can continue like this. Yeah, we can. Yeah, no, he's abstemious today.
What do you mean to train?
At least during the sessions. All that's coming up on the screen is my translation of the Hanuman Chalisa. Which is, I had such a very interesting time this afternoon because of, just let me hold it for a sec. I'll see if I can manage it, and if I can't, then where's Bachi? B-A-C-H-I. Sure.
Meanwhile, till he searches that particular poem, I'm going to tell you something that how Vikram, an economist, trained economist, went into writing. And that is because he sang Raj Kapoor's Awara Hoos song to a Chinese soldier on the Tibet border. And the chap let him cross because he was not letting him cross. When he sang that song to him, that fellow got very impressed and he said, Jaiye. And that was what led to the Heavenly Lake.
See, that's true. Because the Chinese, you'd be quite surprised, know Awara very well. It's one of the 4 films that for some reason were shown even after the Great Cultural Revolution when culture was very severely vetted and what was allowed to be seen was vetted. But I think the idea was whether a judge's son could be a criminal, whether a criminal's son could become a judge and so on. So Awara was allowed to get through. And so they were very fond of what they called Lita and Ladz, Rita and Raj. And they would sing with me. Either they would sing the literal version, like, they wouldn't say Awara, they'd say Abala Gu. Or they'd say, in translation, Dao Chu Liu Lang, which means, in Chinese, everywhere I wander. So I didn't realize that knowing the song of Awara would be such a passport to wherever I wanted to go. I got into the policeman. I wanted to go to Lhasa, but of course, to get a stamp on your Liu Xingjiang was very difficult at that time. So I got to the police station, and he said, well, this was in northwestern China, in Urumqi. And he says to me, well, look, you know, I was there at your Sing Fest when your Nanjing University foreigners troupe each did their own songs. And I loved the fact that you sang Awara with our musicians. So we established a little rapport. So I said, well, I'd like to go to the following places. Could you endorse my internal travel document for Chongqing and Xi'an? And, oh yes, also Lhasa, I slipped that in. And he said, well, I'm not quite sure. Let me see if I can get through to Urumqi, which is the main, the state capital. Luckily, the lines were down. So then, on the basis of a rapport and a song, he stamped my internal passport for Lhasa. Before anything could happen, I rushed back to Nanjing, I got my passport, and I started hitchhiking across Tibet and, what's the other one? Across the Chaidam Basin up into Tibet and then across into Nepal. Amazing that a song can get you as far as it could. Anyway, in this particular case, it isn't a song but a poem that to some extent helped me sort of exculpate myself with Bachi and Anil Bharkar. I can see Bachi cringing there, but I told her earlier, if I can taste your blood, you can. If I can drink your hot blood, you can certainly taste this barfi. So this is a letter to Anil. Anil, I should tell you that I'm only going to read poetry at your festival, no prose at all. In line with the laureateship, and in order to vary and distinguish my appearances in Bombay. I'll do the launch of Summer Requiem on Sunday morning at noon. No one young will be awake and alert at 10:30, and Juhu is quite far from the Taj, Gateway. I'll be doing mainly, but not only prose, a month later at Bachi and Namita's Do, since that will be in line with the lifetime achievement side of things. I fear, though I must say that I hadn't perhaps naively anticipated this, that they're a bit miffed with me for accepting your laureateship, since it precedes their festival. The trouble is that it's easy enough to refuse merely to participate in a lit fest, but it's awkward and a bit graceless to refuse an honor such as yours and theirs. And yet I wonder, if I am lifetime achiever, whipping fans into a fever, but turn first to laureating, why not all are celebrating? What is all this turfi sharfi? Why you cannot share a barfi? You are each a Hindustani. Where is mischief? Where is Hani? Anil, Namita and Bachi, please do not be cross and touchy. Both November and December, each is holding fiery ember. After 4 whole months awaited, Mumbai will feel quite unsated. Maybe I am Tata Ruby, but a diamond mehboobi.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikram. Vikram, one question before, since you were talking poem, I will go on to music also, but one question is, how do you handle writing with all the success around you?
Well, I think there's several prongs to that, but I'll just talk slightly ad lib. I think girls are taught to say no, right? But boys are never taught to say no. And they should be. Because quite often, you know, your life's course or the things you want to do are disturbed by wonderful events that take you out. But they're also disturbed by events that people, want to get a bit of you, they want you to do something. They sometimes forget that you're primarily a writer, not a writer-performer, but a writer, which is a very isolated, I wouldn't say lonely, but I'd certainly say, I said isolated, that'll do, profession. And I have learned the art of saying no. The art of saying no consists of first saying, look, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And then when they say, as they inevitably will say, but why not? Then you must immediately say, because I'm afraid it's just not possible. Now that's just repeating the first sentence. No, but it sounds like a reason because it's preceded by the word because. It sounds slightly apologetic because I'm afraid, and it's just not possible. Yani, agar mumkin hota, kash ki main vagera vagera, I can't, but I would have loved to. And before they can respond to that, you put down the receiver, or you walk away, or you pretend you're occupied with your navel, or whatever. So if you want boys and girls to say after me, I can't do it, just say, I can't do it. I can't do it. But why not? Because I'm afraid it's just not possible. Because I'm afraid it's just not possible. This sentence, as a mantra, will improve your life enormously. And if you take away nothing else from our discussion than this, you will be immensely enriched. So that's one thing. The other is to choose a family like mine, which doesn't let you get too swollen ahead and pulls you down to size if they feel you're becoming a bit uppity. And the third thing is, try to get inspired. I'm a very lazy person, but somehow lightning occasionally strikes at unpredictable periods. And if you tell the muse, look, I'm sorry, I've got these various things that I have to do because I'm in demand, then the muse will go away and will not come back, and you will deserve that happened. So these are various thoughts that I have about the idea of how to write while at the same time being beset by. This is sounding very ungracious. I've come very well, with a great deal of happiness to this festival. But you're the only festival I love. I'm looking deep into your eyes and telling you that. I say it to all the guys, right? At any rate, it is a very important point that you have to clear your calendars. And at one point, by saying no, and I'm afraid it's just not possible, I finally found that I'd reached that blessed point when I had no appointments for the rest of my life. It was a wonderful feeling. And then came Kasoli.
Vikram, since you just read out the poem, a question comes to my mind. Have we really lost Vikram the poet to Vikram the prose writer?
Absolutely not. I'm first and last and always a poet. I don't know how I stumbled into prose. Thank God I did, otherwise I wouldn't have, as earlier Devdutt was saying, you need to keep body and soul together, And poetry doesn't keep body and soul together. You have to subsidize your poetry. Thank God I write something and write it with enjoyment that people are willing to buy. And at least to buy, if not to read, it being a rather fat book. But I wouldn't quibble with that, as long as they buy it. But here's something very interesting. I'm at the moment writing A Suitable Girl. The moment A Suitable Boy was published and did well, my publishers immediately said to me, all right, we've got a suitable boy, now why not a suitable girl or an unsuitable boy, or how about a quartet? You know, you've got a ready-made niche, a ready-made audience, your agents are keen, your publishers are keen. And then they said something really quite mean because they knew I'd be vulnerable, and your readers are keen. But eventually good sense prevailed, and I knew that unless you're gripped by what you're writing, there's absolutely no point in writing it. You'll bore yourself, and if you think you can bore your readers, you're quite wrong.
Vikram,
sorry, if you think you can fool your readers with a boring book, you're quite wrong.
Vikram, I go back about 30, 40 years when I first met you, and I rang you up, and we were to explore the possibility of doing a project together at that time. And you said, yeah, come over, you come and have lunch with me and we can discuss it over lunch. And when I reached, of course you had forgotten about the lunch totally. And you
had forgotten about the project, tell me?
No, that's a separate matter now. And you were having an orange which was half peeled and you put it in front of me. But more than that, what was there, your entire bedroom where you were working was lined with bookshelves and books and books and books of all types and sizes and colors. And on all the bookshelves there were chicks thrown, all of them.
Yeah, actually on the bookshelves, you see, I find books very intimidating. So in fact, I very rarely go into bookshops now, and so I had my books all around my bedroom. But I couldn't write with all these books staring at me, the great books of the past, the trivial books of the past and the present. So what I would do is, I had like a curtain made of chicks, which would cover every single bookshelf, so that my bedroom would at least present some semblance of calm. And then my desk was my duvet. I've written all my books in bed. And sometimes on a bridge table, which is why when I was sitting over here, I felt like scribbling in the bridge room across the way. And on a dark blue duvet, which is my desk, I spread all my papers around a double bed, and that is how I wrote, and that is how I write. And the chicks were there in order to not distract me from all the particularity of individual books. And it's like having, each book is a person, a living spirit. And to be stared at by an audience of thousands while you're trying to write your very private, intense book is a difficult method of proceeding, which is why I covered it with chicks.
You still write longhand?
Poetry always, and prose sometimes.
Yeah, but you don't store anything else in your computer. It's more or less virgin from any other mails or other extraneous matter that there is.
No, unfortunately, it's no longer virginal. I do have all sorts of stuff on my computer, and so if I get some kind of bug, then there'll be no girl.
Okay, just what I think
occasionally I back up.
I'd like to announce here how Suitable Boy is now being made into a television serial now. Can you tell us some detail, give us some detail?
Well, one of the pleasures of this festival has been meeting Divya Dutt and Shatrughan Sinha, and I hope
Asha is here. She's already on the premises, yes.
And it's one of the charms of a literary festival when you find people who are either musicians or photographers or artists or filmmakers or actors who come, so that, you know, writers are quite boring, believe me, in general. So to mix and mill with or maybe writers are boring for writers, but to mix and mill with people from other professions is a great pleasure. What's your question? What is the question? Oh, Suitable, yeah, of course, I forgot. So several times, and occasionally to my economic benefit, people have optioned a suitable boy. By optioned, what it means is that a film company or a television company, for a certain consideration, gains from you the right to make a television serial or a movie or something like that. This has happened several times and they've never actually made it. So this time, when I got various blandishments or approaches or suggestions from various people, I've just ignored them. I've got far more important things to do. My mother was not well, my father is quite frail, my book is in the process of being written, I want to spend a little time with my nieces and also with myself and my friends, and I want to also spend some time doing nothing. And this film thing is pie in the sky. I've discovered from long experience, out of 20 suggestions, one might be made, and then out of 5 that are made, one might be shown. So I've just decided I'm going to have nothing to do with producers and, as I said, blandishments and approaches. So I ignored a whole lot of stuff that came through my letterbox. And then when I went to England recently, someone said, well, how can you be so boorish as not to reply to letters, and the BBC wants to make it. And I said, look, everyone says they want to make it. And they said, well, can we at least meet you? So I said, well, all right, fine. I'm writing, but I'll start writing whenever I do. Please come at 9:15, and we'll talk for 15 minutes, and then... And part of the reason was that the person who said that to me was the daughter of a friend, and I couldn't very well say no. But what I did not realize is that they'd got all their ducks lined up in a row. They were very serious about it. And I thought, well, this has actually gone quite far even without my acquiescence. And I was the only Drake who hadn't been lined up. And I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it only as something that we do jointly. I will insist on helping to choose the director and the producer. They said, that's fine with us. I said, I will only have it done with Indian actors and filmed in India. They said, that's fine. I said, I'm not going to have Alec Guinness do Dr. Godbole in A Passage to India. They said, no, we completely understand your point of view. So then I said, okay, I'll give 2 days of my time away from my book, and we'll do everything. I'll meet the scriptwriter, who actually is a very good scriptwriter. He's done War and Peace and Les Miserables, Andrew Davis. And I met the people, and I realized actually they did mean business. And they were willing to go along with the fact that I want the book to be made by Indian actors in India, and there was no question about that. And they agreed to it. So under those circumstances, we're going ahead.
Vikram, you and I have often discussed classical rags, and particularly the afternoon rags, which are very few.
And great afternoon rags as well.
Yeah, of course, but the numbers are few, of course. Which is your favorite rag? If there's one.
I'll tell you, I mean, it's something very interesting. I was trying to analyze why certain rags, which I love, are my favorites, and I came to a certain conclusion. But let me just tell you the names of the rags first, and then give you my conclusions. One of the rags I love is Tori. Well, let's start from early morning. Lalit. I love Rag Lalit. Rag Tori. Late afternoon, Multani. Around this time of day, Marwa. And then Shri. I do also like other rags like Darbari, Malkos, etc. But these rags I have a particular feeling for. And I realized that the reason why I like them so much is that there's that stretch between, not to get too technical, Komal Re and Tivra Ma. So, I better take a sip. Why do you ask about music? I told him you could throw anything you like at me, but I might decide that, if he says, do you believe, what are your spiritual beliefs? I'll probably say, look, I didn't come to answer that question. But anyway, these 5 rags, I was about to burst into song, but I shall not. They are most beautiful rags. And, of course, it's my truth, so to speak, that if in the morning I can listen to Lalit, and then in late morning I can listen to Tori, And as the afternoon progresses, there's a little hiatus when, you're right, we are rather sparse. The sarang rags don't move me that much. But then if you come to Multani, which is actually the same Surza story, but with different orders, and then you get to Marwa. I think the answer is Marwa. If you want the answer to which my really favorite rag is, it's Marwa. I'm sorry, these are just names, but for me they mean much more than names. It's like Marwa. Who's
Vikram, we
Marwa?
understand you, don't worry.
Tell us. Sa, supposing Marwa is sa, ni re ga ma na ni re sa ni da ma ga re sa. And the interesting thing is that there's no pancham, there's no pa in it, there's no shuddha madhyam. The sa hardly exists because you skip over it going from ni to re. It's and the sense of yearning where you move around it, and only finally, and then you go on, and then finally, and you finally come to sa, and it's such a huge relief. It's as if you've yearned. You either it's love or it's God or whatever it is, or it's stasis finally, but you reach it. And even when you tune the tantra, because as I said, there's no pancham, so you can't tune it to a pancham. There's no madhyam. So like Malkos, at least you can tune it to a madhyam. So what do you tune it to? And people either tune it to the leading note, the nishad. Then when you tune a tantra, it's only sa, pa, sa. It's like, or Malkos, ma, sa. It's a very strange, discordant tuning. Sa, and you hear it and it becomes completely hypnotic. And so either you do that, or I've heard in Bengal they tune it to dha, or some people just ignore the fact that there's no pancham in the rag and they just tune it in the regular way to pa, sa. So it's a very interesting rag in its own right. And if you hear someone like Amir Khan Sahib, or on the Surbahar and the Sarod, Ibn Khan, I think even greater than his brother Vilayat Khan. Whom I think of Malkarjan Mansoor. I mean, there's nothing that could take you. And I suppose I'm better known really as a writer on Western music because of unequal music.
Which one do you think is the most difficult rag? For me, I'm not really an expert on rags or something, but for me, rag Tilak Kamoda is the most difficult one. For me, but then I'm not.
I'll tell you, I think as I say, these rags with Komal Rishabh and Tivra Madhyam are quite difficult because getting the sur absolutely pakka is very, very difficult. And also, but once you've got it, you've got it. And so I would say, maybe Lalit, maybe Kedar. Actually, frankly, this is not a very helpful question. What's difficult? The point is what affects. Not how people say, your writing is very natural. As Robert Frost said, easy reading is damned hard writing. And another point, he said something very charming. I tend to write with rhyme and meter and all that rhymey-dimey stuff. He says writing without rhyme and meter, writing poetry without writing rhyme and meter is like playing tennis with the net down.
Okay, we seem to be running out of time now. But one question, you at one stage, if I'm correct, you were planning to write a play. Is there any possibility of seeing that also?
I don't try to write in different forms just for the sake of being versatile. If something inspires me, then I don't run away from it simply because I've never done it before. Or what's the worst that can happen? You'll fail, or you'll fall flat on your face, or you might write something bad that's praised a lot, or you might write something good that's ignored. That is not in your hands. I have written a libretto, which is like a play to which people set music, like it's an opera, which is the sort of play. I did write a play once, actually a play in verse called Lynch and Boyle, set in a publishing company. But I read it once and I didn't like it very much. And then about 8 or 9 years later, I thought perhaps I've been too intolerant to my younger self, and maybe there's some redeeming aspect of this play, and I reread it, but there wasn't.
Okay, before we end this session, can I request you to just recite one of your poems?
Sure. I'm afraid that the tenor of this discussion has been rather, because we're friends, so it's been rather light-hearted. But I will say something about Khushwant, which was wonderful, and if I can have any aspect of that, I would feel myself blessed, which is that Khushwant was a serious man, but what's the word? He was not grave. He was serious without having some kind of heavy air of gravitas. And I loved him the more for that, and I admired him the more for that. And I think, as someone once said, that life, in fact, I think it was Shaw who said, but I might be wrong about that life does not cease to be a tragedy because people laugh, nor does it cease to be a comedy because people die. And this concomitant, simultaneous, the fact that these things live side by side, that one puts up with things, that one's here for a very, very short period of time. Even those of us who are fortunate to have a modicum of health and unlike most of our country, men and women, or most of the people in the world, even for us, tragedy is always close by. Our deaths are sadly unavoidable. And these things live side by side. So the poem that you earlier asked me to read, which I can actually recite, is All You Who Sleep Tonight, which is a very short poem, 8 lines long. And we then open it to the floor, or what? All you who sleep tonight, far from the ones you love, no hand to left or right, and emptiness above. Know that you aren't alone. The whole world shares your tears, some for 2 nights or 1, and some for all their years.
Beautiful. Okay, with this, Anand, can we pass the mics around? We'll take a few questions. Is there a question for Vikram? Well, there's, quite a few hands. Anand, can you, there's...
Good evening, sir. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to hear you speak. Thank you so much. My question to you is that in storytelling and poems, how has writing impacted you? What impact do you think stories have on the bigger real-life world? In a nutshell, what do you love about writing?
Well, the poem, for example, that I read or recited doesn't tell a story. It just gives a momentary expression of emotion. But when you write a longer piece, then something has to thread it together. And actually, why don't you stand up, then I can see your eyes. Yes. So what I find is that with regard to often modern novels, I find unless there's something that threads it, that interests me, that intrigues me in the characters, that propels the story forward, whether it's Dostoevsky or Tintin, it has to be story. And I know that in modern academia, that's something plot and story are given very minor emphasis or importance. But for me, that's the heart of it. Maybe being brought up as an economist and not having studied English literature at university, I just feel like, well, why should I turn the page unless I want to? And I hope that my books, even if they're rereadable and for all the sort of literary palaver that's made about them, at heart, they are stories. At heart, a novelist is basically a gossip. Maybe he tells gupshup at a higher order, with a higher literary capacity, but basically it's, you know, a suitable boy, translated to Hindi is koi acha sa ladka. Yani dhoond lo koi acha sa ladka. Aur qissa usse shuru hota hai. You know, that's how you tell anything. That's how you can hold your own interest, let alone that of the reader.
Anybody else? Yeah, Anand.
Hi, Vikram.
I'll see you. Oh, there. Right. I think the photographer's in the way. Ah, yes, thank you.
Hi. I'm sure everyone wants to know this. And how's the wine?
How's the wine? There's a famous thing about good wine needs no bush. You know, in other words, the sign on the pub door, on the inn or the pub, which may say the Fox and Grapes or Crown and Anchor. The main thing is the quality of the beer or the wine sold within. Now, my very generous hosts, Rahul, Nilüfer, the club, Ashok, and the, I won't say the ghosts of Kushwant, but the presence of Kushwant, have, during the course of the festival, provided all of us, whether it's with Glenlivet over there or with wine of a sort here. But I will say something, and I hope I'm not spilling the beans here. The main thing about a conversation is the interlocutor rather than the wine. But the wine was supplied by an organization, or was supposed to have been supplied by an organization, which at 5 minutes to midnight pulled out. And the festival has had to go through, and huge kudos and congratulations to them, that despite this sudden jhatka that they got, they've managed to maintain and create a wonderful festival. So the very least thing that I'm concerned about is whether the wine is... I'm concerned about whether we're having a good conversation, whether the milieu is wonderful, whether there's the mehfil is jamar, and it is. And good for the people who've managed to bring this true, and I would say shame on the people who pulled out.
We can take one more question if there's anyone there wanting to ask a question. Anand, there, right in the middle. Money is
Money
also
can always
here.
ask a question, even if he's an extra one. We can
Yeah.
take...
All right, Money first.
I don't know you very well, but your father was a very, very close friend of mine.
Can you hear at the back?
I said, I don't know you very well, but your father, especially when he was in the STC,
Money, hold
was
it
a...
close to you all. Oh, I think the mic might not be very good, right?
No.
Take it.
Here, is it all right? Can you hear me now? I said, while I don't know you very well, your father was a very close friend of mine, and subsequently your mother was a very close friend of mine. So might I ask you to just say a word or two about your mother, of course, but your father doesn't much figure in your public statements. I'd like to hear you talk about your father for a minute.
Mani, thank you for that. Thank you for that. You know, my mother, was my late mother. I dedicated a suitable boy to Papa, my father, Papa and Mama, and the memory of Amma, that is my Nani, the only grandparent of the four that I've known, because the other three died before I was born. Then my Nani, of course, before my book, A Suitable Boy, was written. And I'd hoped that I could dedicate a suitable girl in the same way to Papa, Mama, and the memory of Amma. Now, I can't do that. I'll dedicate it, I hope, to Papa and the memory of Mama and Amma. And I've given my father, with whom I have a drink every evening, strict instructions that he's to not die before a suitable girl is written. I do not want to dedicate it to the memory of Papa, Mama and Papa. Now, I won't talk too much about my mama because my mother, first Chief Justice of a state, of a High Court, the first woman who 3 months after the birth of her child came first in the bar in England in 57 in Michaelmas term. Men, women, British, Indians alike. A mother who I thought of first as a mother rather than as this distinguished personage, and who never had, and Khushwant again shared that, this idea of being grand simply because of what you've done or the way the world regards you. What I'll do, Mani, is read a poem that I wrote to my father on his 90th birthday, and that will say it all. And if you do not mind, audience, I will end with that, because having finished that, I really will not be able to continue further. So that is how I will end this session, with a poem to my father on his 90th birthday. And the watch that I wear is the watch that he gave me and that I wind up every day, an old Omega Seamaster, which he bought, I think, for £8 or £9 in Oslo airport in the duty-free some 50 or 60 years ago. And that's one of the things I mentioned in this poem. It's called Small Things. And the book of my collected poems, which is published in England, unfortunately not available here, this and a poem to my mother are the dedicatory poems at the very beginning of the book. It's 5 stanzas long. Each stanza is 8 lines. Small things. By the way, my father was a wonderful shoemaker. He always called himself the Mochi. The way that I think you, Mani, knew him was through that connection, wasn't it? Yeah. When he tried to increase the value added, to use my economist's hat, the value added in India to the leather trade, because we used to just sell our hides abroad. They would then make uppers and whatever was required and get most of the value added from shoes. And Papa made a big difference, with the help of people like Mani, to institute a kind of system in India where our, I wouldn't say hundreds of thousands, our millions of people in the leather trade were given access not only to our market, but to markets abroad, and to get a better level of income and everything that goes with that. Anyway, small things. For Papa on his 90th birthday. The start of all things, small or great. My bronze Ganesh embodied Om. Tiny, but heavier than his weight. I pack him first when leaving home. But 3 things else, your gift to me over the years, for use, not prayer. Sorry, shall I speak in this or that? Okay, I'm sorry, let me just do it on my own. I was going to begin again because एक तरह से वो हो जाता है ना, तो फिर से शुरुआत करनी पड़ती है. Small things for Papa on his 90th birthday, 2013. Papa's now 93. The start of all things, small or great. My bronze Ganesh embodied Om. सुनिए, पीछे कोई बात कर रहा है, उन्हें जरा कहिए कि So for the 3rd time lucky. Small things. For Papa on his 90th birthday. The start... जैसे वो कहते हैं ना शत्रुघ्न सिन्हा, खामोश, आपकी आवाज सुनाई दे रही है आप जरा This is a very serious poem, so I'll just pause for a minute or two and just, a second or two. I know you can't hear the sounds in the back, but I can, you know. The start of all things, small or great, my bronze Ganesh embodied Om, tiny but heavier than his weight. I pack him first when leaving home. But three things else, your gifts to me over the years, for use, not prayer, imbue me with your company, however I may be, or fair. Your cufflinks, given in the hope your scruffy son might mend his ways, which, while he hasn't, help him cope with airports, nervousness, and days when the whole world seems crazy, and two lesser globes give him at length the sense that you are close at hand to keep him sane and lend him strength. The shaving brush I use each day with fist and wrist to foam my face in the old premillennial way at my own premillennial pace. I ask the eyes that stare at me, what have I done or left undone? What work today or deed would be worthy of you or of your son? And your old watch, for £9 bought in Norway 50 years ago, its mottled face so cleanly wrought, its hands with their nocturnal glow. Nightly I wind it and observe its fine red needles swivel fast, too fast, along creation's curve, from Om to Omega at last. I hope you die before I do. Not soon, but when you wish to go. Both now and then they'll speak of you, the link, the touch, the tick, the glow. More than the grace of trunk and tusk, your minor trinity will prove, by lonely dawn or doubtful dusk, the gift of courage and of love.
My book to be signed by General Red.
Sorry?
My book to be signed by...
You want it?
Raghavan.
You want in the front cover?
Ladies and gentlemen, please settle down for the next session. Please settle down. The next session is with Asha Parekh. Khalid Mohammed will be on stage and Ajay Margo, and he will be in conversation with the hit girl Asha Parekh. She's right here and she's just going to walk in. So just settle down, please. Ladies and gentlemen, as I announced earlier, we also have Khalid Muhammad with us, who also needs no introduction, and Ajay Margo. Ajay, can I hand it over to you?
Good evening, everyone. So I'll start, I think, immediately right now for Asha ji. I would like to say, like, recently, Asha Parekh, the hit girl, was adjudged the second best book published in India by the Federation of Indian Publishers. So Asha ji, why did we have to wait so long for your autobiography?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this question of waiting so long to come out with my autobiographies, I feel that one should go through life for a long time because you collect a lot of material for an interesting book which people would like to read. So I thought that it was, when I was young, I didn't think of an autobiography, but when I really took a seat back, I realized that I should write an autobiography.
Okay, Khalid, you've been quiet today. You've been quiet today. Okay, so the next question is to you. So Khalid, do you realize that you're insisting on Asha ji telling her story has added in no small measure to the chronicling of the prolific Mumbai film industry? How did you manage to convince her to tell her story which was untold so far?
Okay, lots of questions in there. So I'll just start with my take by saying that actually the book came about just by off chance, and Asha ji, if I may call her that, or Ms. Asha Parekh, I've known her since I joined journalism, which makes it about 40 years, and hadn't even sprouted a mustache, and I was meeting all these stars and thankfully not getting awed by them. And my intention to do an autobiography, a collaborative one, if I might call it that, is that I don't want to get into the hagiography area, which is dangerous. And I had got into a bit of that at a commissioned book for Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, which was a coffee table book. And it was like, you know, just very, very hagiographish. So then next I did a transliteration of M.F. Hussein's autobiography, which was great fun because he allowed me to add to it. And then there have been, you know, I mean, publishers always want a saleable biography of a star. I mean, Rekha always, whether there are 10 books on her or whether it's a desk job or whatever. But of late, there seems to be a market as such for star books, which wasn't there earlier, let's say, in the earlier millennium. So suddenly there's a boom in star biographies, and I think they go all over the world to the NRI population. And so to cut a very long story short, Asha ji was actually bugged with me for something I'd written as an obituary piece to Sadhna about 2 years ago. And I had favorably compared her as the more serious, or an actress with more gravitas. And I got a phone call from Asha ji after about a 10-year break. So I said, hey, hang on, it wasn't meant to be a rude jibe or anything. I meant well, so may I drop by? So I dropped by and I got a Gujarati meal and I said, so why haven't you ever done a biography on yourself? So she said, and these are exact words, because no one has asked me, which includes Bharti there, who's a good friend. She never asked her. So that's how it started, and I said, okay, ma'am, I will not be all sugar and sweet. There will have to be the reality bites kind of stuff, and that's how the project rolled. Biographies are much, much easier to write than a novel or a self-autobiography thing. Like I've done a couple of scripts which are based on my own life, which were very tough. They took me about 3 to 4 years. A film called Zubaida, for instance. But when you're writing an autobiography in collaboration with somebody, you're just mirroring his or her thoughts. So you're basically a receptacle, and I don't usually record because that's another process and it ties you up in knots. So I used to take notes, and we managed to complete her book, The Hit Girl, within a year, which was pretty quick compared to books on stars. I think, Bharti, if I'm right, it took you 7 years to do Shatrughan Sinha. So I did a smooth job, and I hope she liked it. So far, no complaints. Yes?
Yeah, perfect. So, Ashuji, your mother was a Bohra Muslim and father a Vaishnav Gujarati. And they got together during a period of huge communal turmoil. What was their relationship like?
Well, there was a mom and dad's mothers. They both were friends, so they used to go and meet each other at each other's place. And some of these people also used to go to my dad's house, and my dad would go to my mother's house, and they fell in love. And when people came to know about it, the families came to know about it, they were very upset about it. Because at that time, I'm talking of 1940, I mean, intercaste marriage was absolutely taboo, you know. And my mother was sent away to Pune, to Ferguson College to study, so that they would be apart. But then my father would go every weekend to see my mother and meet her. And that's how he proposed to her in Pune, and they got married. But it was a very bad time for them. They had to run away to Delhi, stay in a small house. I mean, they didn't have any money. They were in such bad situation that when my grandfather came to know about it, he sent some money to them. At that time, I think 10,000 rupees was quite a lot of money. So he sent about 10,000 rupees to my father to say that at least you can go ahead with it. That's how they lived their life.
If I may intervene, do you think intercaste marriage like your parents would have been possible today?
It would be much more easier. Don't you think so? I think so. That it would be much more easier right now. Because
that can be debatable, what with honor killings and whatnot.
It can be debatable, but I personally feel that at that time it was very bad. It was really, really very bad, because 1940 it was unheard of that a Muslim getting married to a Hindu. So that's why they had to go through a lot of trouble, lot of problems. My mother was beaten up by her father and said that you're not going to get out of the house. She was locked up. But how they met and how they got married, you'll have to read the book to know what it is.
Thank you. Okay. But are we more secular today, if I may emphasize the point?
Yes, we are. We are very secular.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So as a child, you were deeply interested in dancing and acting. Premnath, Beena Rai and Bimal Roy played important roles in recognizing your talent. Could you elaborate on that, please?
When I was around 8 or 9, I used to dance on records, and whenever there was the music was put on the radio, I used to dance. And my mother used to say, "What is this girl up to?" And we used to all dance. When my friends were there, we used to dance. And next door, the chartered accountant, Mr. Sudarshan ji, was staying. And Premnath ji used to visit his house very often. So he saw me dancing once, and he said, my God, this girl is great. So he went and brought Beena Rai, he brought Madhubala, he brought Beena Rai to see me dancing. And my mother said, this girl is just dancing like this, and she was not very impressed about it. Then came a time when my school's 75th year was to be celebrated, and there was a big function, and they wanted a star. So they requested my mother if we knew anybody, if we could bring somebody. My mother said, yes, we know Premnathji and we can ask him if he could come. At that time, Premnathji was a big star. So we went to his house and he said, well, I will definitely come if Asha's going to dance. My mother said she doesn't know how to dance, she just dances on records. And in this huge function, I don't want her to be doing this sort of a dance. So he said, no, I will not come. Only if she's going to perform, I'm going to come. So my mother went to late Mohanlal Pandey and asked him to get me ready for a dance in 7 days. I had to pick up an item in 7 days and put on the stage. And that's how I came onto the stage to perform. That's how I was performing at other various places. And late Bimal Roy saw me on stage. And he, after my performance, he asked, who's that girl? Please call her. I want to talk to her. And so I was asked to go and meet him. And the first thing he said, will you work in films? I had no idea about it. I said, yes, yes, I will work in films. And that's how my career started as a child artist in Ma.
That was the first movie you did?
Yes, that was my first movie.
And how was your experience in terms of, were you excited to do that?
I was too tiny to even think about it. Because I was about 8 or 9. I didn't know what the camera was, what was happening. It was just what dialogues were given to me and I had to perform on it. That's how I performed.
Okay. So you did a series of cameos before you were offered Vijay Bhatt's Gunjuti Chennai. And something went wrong off track. So what happened?
I worked as a child artist in 3-4 films. And I worked in Vijay Bhatt's film, which was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a child artist. And when I grew up, he again called me and signed me for Gunjuti Chennai. After 2 days of shooting with me, he suddenly called us and said, you are not star material and you have to be out of the film. It was a big jolt to me, a jolt to my mother, who was a backbone of my career. Whatever I am today, it is because of my mother. It was a big jolt, and after that, I went for the Mahurat of Behrupia. By that time, the whole industry knew that I was thrown out of Gunjuti Chennai. S. Mukherjee saw me and he said, come here, I believe you're not working in Gunjuti Chennai. I said, no, I'm not working. He says, come to my office tomorrow, I want to meet you. So I went to his office and he said that he would like to take a screen test. And Nandlal Jaswantal, one of the topmost directors of those times, took my screen test. And Mr. Nasir Hussain saw this test and he liked one of my close-ups. And he said, let's try her for Dil De Ke Dekho. And that's how I came into Dil De Ke Dekho and I became a heroine.
So the 60s had found their hit girl. It was you and everyone said, Tumsa Nahi Dekha. So was it that film, like what did the film do to you?
Well, overnight I became a star. It was, I couldn't even believe it. It was at Novelty Cinema. It was released on my birthday. And just after the interval, when I came out, people gushing all over me. And I didn't know where to look and what was happening. And I suddenly realized people were asking for autographs. And I said, my God, where have I landed, you know? That's how I felt when my first film was released.
In the book, you also mentioned that you were pinched.
Yes, I was pinched around. I felt miserable about it, but couldn't help it. I didn't know what was happening at that time because I was too much in a shock.
Okay, so in the film industry, you remained a single woman. And was there any, there were no rumors about your affairs. Was that because you were committed to somebody? Did you fall in love with somebody? Or what happened?
As every human being, I'm also not a nice maiden. I had to fall in love.
Sure,
I
there are
had to
some
fall in love, as every human being falls in love. So I fell in love. Maybe it was not the right person because he was a married person. Maybe it was not in my destiny to be married. That's how it is.
So the book does mention that the person we're talking about is Mr. Nasir Hussain. So he is a Muslim. He could have married many times. So what prevented you from getting married to him?
Well, I didn't want to be the second woman.
Okay. All right. So on the screen, you played a second woman pretty convincingly in Main Tulsi Tere Aangan Ki. So did you put any of yourself into that performance? Was there any emotional memory or emotional connect with that?
Emotional connect, yes, in a way, but it was a very well-written script. The dialogues were so beautiful that when people saw the film, my dying in the film looked as if it was the end of the film.
But it was one of the longest death scenes ever, if I remember right. I mean, how did you hold your breath?
No, I don't think so.
It was there. I mean, it was a long shot, but...
I mean, in a long shot, you don't have...
Long shot. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, I don't.
It was a long shot and it went on for what looked like eons. So how did you hold your breath? Because I'm speaking from experience. I had a death scene with another actor and she could not do it. And we had to freeze the frame because the nose kept twitching. So how easy or difficult is it to play a death scene?
I've done death scenes in 2-3 films and I don't think it is so difficult, except that I remember in Samadhi, I was supposed to be dying, and I die in it. And my house was raided by the income tax people that day. I was so tensed up that when I had to die in the film, we were shooting simultaneously. The raid was going on in my house, and I was shooting in the studio. And my eyes were constantly flickering away because there was so much of tension there. So that was one time when it was difficult for me to die.
Okay, and I also noticed that during your romantic scenes, especially during the hugs, you'd get a bit shy and you'd cover yourself like this.
No.
True? No?
No. You're making it up now.
No. Okay, so would you have done a kissing scene, let's say?
No, that I wouldn't do.
Why not? I mean, it's...
When I was there, when I was working in films, we never had these kissing scenes. So I was lucky that I was in that sort of a period when these kissing scenes were not there. Thank God for that.
But do you think there's anything wrong with kissing scenes?
Nothing is wrong about it. I mean...
Or nudity, because you've been a censor chief also.
Well, I don't mind the nudity, but I don't like the filthy language which people use. Language is one thing which I feel that if you use bad words in films, people ape you. So if the children are going to see that film, they are going to use those words against the parents. So that's what I don't like it. I don't like filthy language.
Okay. While we are on censorship, may I bring up the topic of Fire, which dealt with same-gender sex, and you allowed it to be passed and got into a hot situation. Can you explain why you passed it and how you dealt with the flack?
No, I didn't find it very bad, the film, and...
No, not a question of being very bad, but... you did defend it, right?
I did defend it because I didn't find it anything vulgar about the film, and it was done very aesthetically. So I passed the film, and after that, I mean, all that trouble which had come up when the film was released and the Shiv Sena had taken a lot of hue and cry about it, I passed the film, and the film was released properly.
Okay. What I'm asking you is that as a censor chief, did you face any tricky situations, and can you name one or two?
Yes, I had a lot of problems with a few films. Take, for instance, Elizabeth. Mr. Shekhar Kapoor created a big hue and cry about the film, and...
But why?
Well, he wanted a complete U certificate, and the film had a lot of gory scenes in it. A film which was given an R rating in England, why should the Indian people see a film with U certificate? Why should the children see such gory scenes? So we had to take an objection to it, and he went up to the tribunal. Ultimately, what happened? It was a UA certificate. It was not a U certificate.
But do these U and UA really make a difference?
I always feel that the censorship starts at home. Why can't parents leave their children, or if they want to, if the child cannot be left behind, why can't they avoid seeing a film which has been certified as A? That's the first question I would ask. People say, well, you can see everything on internet, you can see everything on the web. Okay, you can see it, but you have to see what your child is seeing. I mean, censorship starts at home. It doesn't start at the censor board. This is what my feeling is, and this is what I think it should be.
Okay, so what do you think about today's censorship, Mr. Pailaj Nihalani, now Mr. Prasun Joshi? Your comment, your remarks, what do you think is happening, and what can we do?
Well, Mr. Pailaj was doing his job, and what he thought was not right, he tried to say that it's not right. We have to go according to the guidelines of the government which have been laid down. So, I mean, what he was doing, he may be doing his job, and he thought he was doing the right thing.
But he said he was doing a sanskari job. I mean, it's not a censor man's job to do a sanskari job, it's to do a film, right?
It's up to him. How can I say about what he should be doing and what he should not be doing?
Okay, so you liked his form of censorship?
Well, certain times yes, certain times no.
Okay, I'm going to give the mic back to Mr. Nego.
Okay, so having acted with the leading heroes of the 60s like Rajesh Khanna, Jitendra, Shami Kapoor, Dharmendra, Manoj Kumar, what do you recall of each of them and their quirks?
Well, they were all nice people with whom I worked. But I enjoyed working with Mr. Shami Kapoor the best because I had a good rapport with him, and plus he was the first person with whom I was the heroine of the Dekhe Dekho. So he taught me a lot of things, and it was quite natural that, you know, I could relate to him easily. So one of the things I liked about Mr. Shami Kapoor was that I could relate to him.
You ever had any problems like while working with these people?
No, I have not had any problems with any one of them. If I had a problem, I wouldn't be working.
But you didn't like Dharmendra drinking on the sets. From what I remember, he came smelling like a brewery and you threw a fit, correct?
No, I had told the producer that whenever Mr. Dharmendra comes drunk, I'm going to walk out of the sets. So it was given to him that he should not be drunk on the set. So he never got drunk on my sets.
Okay. And no actors you had problems with?
No, I don't think I had any problems with.
Don't name him, but...
I just had one problem with one star, and I stopped working with him. I did 2 or 3 films with him, and I stopped working with him. And he was a little nasty.
Problem?
Well, he was a big star, so he was having his egos. He had his egos. I couldn't say anything more about it.
Okay, can you give us a clue?
No.
Please.
Okay.
No, I don't want to name anybody.
Okay, what about, okay, you said he had a ego. Heroines also have an ego, right? So you had scrapes with, say, Simi Garewal and Aruna Irani, which are mentioned in the biography. I'm not saying anything new. Well, maybe Kasoli people don't know that. So what happens when 2 women get catty about the amount of footage they have?
Well, once they went on the papers, in the media, to say that I had cut their role or I had, tried to be nasty with them, they came back to me and said, "We are sorry, we didn't mean to say all these things. It was just cooked up by the press. So that I do not know whether it was cooked by the press or whether they really meant what they wanted to say.
Okay, soft question.
Okay, some of my favorite films which you've acted as Dobadan, Tisri Manzil, Main Tulsi Tere Aangan Ki, and all-time favorite Kati Patan. What is your favorite film?
That's not for me to say, that's for the audience to say which one they would like.
Yeah, they have their time after our session, so.
Yeah, I know, but it's very difficult for me to say which one was good and which one was bad.
Any personal favorites?
No, all were my favorites because I would select my films. I would hear the script, I would hear my role, and then agree to work in the film.
Okay, so maybe later.
Okay, which was the worst?
Worst? I think Rakhi or Hatkadi was the worst. I had a double role, but it was a very bad film.
One reason why?
I don't know. The director was not the right person to direct a film like this, and something went wrong with the script.
Okay, so as one goes towards 40s or 50s, the shelf life of a female actor is almost over. So to make the transition to mom roles, was that a choice to take, or did you go into it, and why did you leave so early?
Well, I did a few roles, mother roles, Bhabhi's roles, but there was a time when one of the actors,
who?
I'm not going to name anybody, so don't go on asking me. You don't know.
I do.
Okay. Anyhow, he would come at, the shift would be at around 9 o'clock in the morning, and he would come at 6:30 in the evening, when it's time for pack-up, and want to shoot. It was getting too much for me. I mean, I was not used to this sort of a thing. And I said, Miss Parekh, what are you trying to do? It's better that you get out. So I stopped signing films and said I didn't want to work anymore.
Go in now.
That's what you are saying. It's not me saying.
Okay. On this note, Mr. Shatrughan Sinha, who was here, I mean, you turned from terrible foes into friends, right? So can I have the foe part? What happened?
You want me to say all my secrets out and all the negative
No, they're in
things?
the book, but usually whether it's at a conference
Bharti, don't you think he's really bullying me? He's making it interesting.
Interesting is an interesting word, but I'll go back to Mr. Sinha, yes, because the time is ticking.
You see, the thing was that, as I said, he was a big star at that time. And I was working in the film Hira. And he would come and he would again come late on the sets and throw tantrums. And there was a dance being picturized, and I had some, mashals in my hand. And I was supposed to take it near him. So he said, hey, mere ko jala dalegi, that sort of a thing he started off with. And then he went to the press and he said, every time I shot with her, I would wash my hands with eau de cologne. That was very nasty, I thought. And after that, he came and met me. I didn't talk to him, and he was very hurt about it. And after that, lots of years passed. He rang me up and he said, would you be the censor chief? Sushma ji is asking me, would you like to be the chairperson of the censor board? And I said, let me think about it. He said, think quick and answer quickly. And I said, okay, I will be the censor chief. And that's how we became friends. He did a good turn to me. I asked him to come to Delhi for my launching of my book. In one way, he immediately said yes, and he came. I was very happy.
Yeah. So you were a fashion icon and trendsetter. So what were your style statement?
Well, I had very good designers for me when I started my work in Dil De Ke Dekho. I had Madame Pompadour of the Taj doing my dresses. I had Bhanu Athaiya doing my dresses. So all the dresses were done by them. The hairstyle was different. S. Mukherjee was very keen that it was minutely he would see that how I was dressed up. I should be dressed up in a proper manner. My hairstyle should be correctly done. So he used to take a lot of interest in it, and that taught me what it is to be stylized. And I learned from him a lot.
Do you like the fashion now or then?
That's again a very tricky question. Well, I like to be draped up in saris, and I like women draped up in saris. They look very elegant.
So you like both fashions?
Yes.
Okay. So, but sari is your favorite?
Yes.
But do you think you set off any trends, those tight kurtas, like skin tight? How did you get into them? The big bouffants, and sometimes wonder, I mean, how did they do it?
Well, it was not difficult getting into them, but they were
Getting out.
stylized. Yes, it looked difficult, but it wasn't difficult. It was quite good.
And how long did those bouffants take?
Oh my God. Yes, they used to take a lot of time, about 1.5 hours to get our hair done, 45 minutes to do your makeup, get into their dress.
Did you ever like to go natural? I mean, I can only think of one instance, Bahar Unke Sapne. Okay?
Yes.
So that was a film of some gravitas, and it didn't do well. After that, you never did a serious film again.
Tulsi was serious.
Well, you know, there you were playing mill workers, family, and there was a strike, and there was death, and incidentally, why was the death scene changed to a happy ending suddenly after one day?
Because people didn't like our dying away in the film. So we had to change the end.
Okay. So how did you make the shift from films to television and directing TV series and interviews-based shows?
I was interested in direction, and I was offered a film to be directed by Mahesh Bhatt. It didn't work out, and I said, well, let me start my own company and start a serial. I started off with a Gujarati serial, not being very confident about myself directing a serial, but God's grace, the serial was a very big hit in Gujarat, and that gave me confidence of getting into television, and that's how I started directing serials on TV. My Kora Kagas was again a very big hit. After that I did Kangan, I did Kuch Pal Saath Tumhara, and that's how I got into television.
If I may ask, you also did a lot of interviews with film personalities.
Yes.
Like say on the dance form, Bajaj Payal, etc. But I believe you can't get those prints, and some of them may have just vanished. And haven't you appealed to the Doordarshan, okay, can I have a print? Because many of the prints are rotting in the archives, and there's no value for the work already there.
Khalid, to tell you very frankly, the serial was a very, very big hit. And today also in the middle of the night, they do release Bajaj Payal. It's not in the archives, as you think. It is still being shown, but in the night they showed it.
Okay, but when I asked you about your other serials, you said you don't have a copy and nothing is accessible.
Nothing is accessible because I immediately closed down my office after I was doing a Gujarati serial. And I had a lot of problems with my director, my stars. So I said, no, I don't want to do any more of this work. Let's close down shop. So I closed down my shop, and when I went to see, there were no cassettes of Kora Kakas, nor Kangan, nor Bajaj Payal for that matter.
As a director, did being a woman affect you? Did they tend to be more, let's say, bossy with you?
No, not at all. On the contrary, my assistants used to go around saying that they were directing, they were ghost directing, And
so that's not a good thing.
That was not a good thing, but then I had Renuka Shane siding me, and she went to the press and said, no, she's directing it. It's not anybody else doing it. It's she who is directing it.
Are you going to direct anything again? So?
Sorry?
Are you going to direct anything again, like films or?
I'm just going to relax now, enjoy life. I've worked a lot.
Okay. So you have battled depression and loneliness and emerged victorious. There's an inspirational tale out there. So if you can just speak about that as well.
Well,
that phase of your life.
It happened so that I've been the only child of my parents. I lost my mother first, then I lost my father, and then I suddenly find myself in a vacuum. I didn't know what was happening to me, and suddenly I got into a depression because I was lonely. I didn't have anybody. But then my doctor friends saw me in that state and called a psychiatrist, and he said he would give me some tablets, small tiny tablets for some time, and you'll be able to get out of it. And I did get out of it, and I'm enjoying life now. I'm happy.
Okay, if I may ask, that chapter on battling with depression and loneliness was a last-minute thing. You never told me about it, but I saw a doctor come in and I noticed that he could have been a psychoanalyst and asked you, what's he there for? And then the chapter happened. So did you want to keep this out of the book?
Well, it's not a thing which I was very keen on writing about, but then I thought if I write about it, let's be very truthful about my life. So I said, yes, this thing happened to me, and I spoke about it in details to you.
Are you sure you don't ever get relapses of depression or loneliness, or, you know, we all go through it, lowering of self-esteem, self-confidence, or are you perfectly happy?
I think I'm happy now because I know where I am, and what I'm doing. So I think I'm happy.
Okay, touch wood.
Touch wood, yeah.
If there is a message you would like to give it to the present generation of heroes and heroines and people among out here, what would that be?
Be happy, live happy, enjoy life. You live for today. That's what I would say.
Okay, so that's anything else, Khaled, you'd like to ask?
Okay. See, selling a book to a publisher on the 1960s wasn't very easy, and especially if someone has been sort of low profile. So I went through various publishers, and there was a point when we were going to self-publish, and I asked Mr. Mago, okay, would he be interested? And why did you hem and haw initially, if I may ask?
You know, when you came to me about, I think it was over the call, right, phone call, and I was quite interested because we have grown with the movies, and most of the movies were quite successful, and we all loved it. And when I spoke to my team, they were mostly young people. You know, they were quite concerned whether we should do or not. But then I just said, okay, I think it's the right time to tell the world the real story. You know, so that was the decision which I personally took.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but most book publishers, especially it's a celebrity book, they want a star-studded launch, and that becomes a production in itself. So, and I'll deflect the question to Ashaji. How easy or difficult was it to get Salman Khan to release your book in Bombay and Amir Khan in Delhi?
Well, it was very easy. I just went to Salim Bhai, Salman's father, and asked him if, first and foremost, Salman Khan writing the foreword. And he agreed to it, and we talked to Salman, and he agreed to do the foreword. And after that, I went back to him. I said, I want him to launch the book. And he said, okay, it will be done. It was that easy. And then for Amir, I rang him up, and I said, well, I want you to do a favor to me. He said, what is it? I said, I want you to launch the book. He said, yes, definitely. I said, but in Delhi? He said, yes, definitely. And he came to Delhi, and we had a good launch there.
Yeah, so since you have now seen how the books have been launched...
Do such launches help the book, really?
It does to some extent, because you get the extended media as well for covering it with the big star. So to some extent it does help, but it's just a matter of some time, but the real thing is the book. So the book must be good and must be talked about. So that's important. But launches are there for sure.
So why don't you go back to, say, the 60 stars and the 70 stars? Because the accent is mainly on the people, on the stars of
To launch
today,
it?
the youth. No, not to launch, publish books on them.
Why don't we go there?
Yeah. Why
We
don't
did.
you go into the yesteryear?
Yeah, but we did. We did a book as well, and then we still, one, but we did Shatrughan Sinha as well at the same time. We're trying as well, so it depends. I love to do most of the books, but obviously it's a big market and a lot of publishers around. But I would like to do, I have a wish list of at least 10 people more, which I would like to publish. It just connect. So if you can connect me to all the people, I would love to.
Okay, Ashaji, truthfully, tell me now about the whole process of going through the experience of a book, because we did have arguments and sulks, etc. So, how do you look back on opening yourself?
Well, in the beginning I was wondering whether what I'm doing is right or wrong. But then I wanted to let people know that I was just not a star. Because somebody commented, oh, she's just a film star. I was not just a film star. I've done a lot of work. I have, done TV. I've done distribution. I've been the Cine Artist Association president for 6 years. I've been a Cine Artist Welfare Trust treasurer for about 8 or 9 years. So I have been doing social work as such. I run a hospital in Bombay, and I'm a trustee there. So it's not that, I've not been doing anything except acting. There are lots of things which are there in my life.
And you're a very good cook as well.
Okay, how are you going to keep that hospital running? Because right now it is closed because of such situation.
Yes, the
how
situation.
does one keep an institution going? How will this charity continue? Do you hope to restart?
The thing is that donations are not very easily given these days. And we went through a very bad time. And we had to shut down the hospital. We have to now collaborate with other big hospitals which are commercial. I feel very sorry and very upset about it. There are people, this was a hospital for the poor. Where does a poor man go for his medical aid? Nowhere. You have commercial hospitals where you go there, they charge exorbitant prices. How is a poor man going to go to the hospital? I don't know. It's a very sad thing that I have to make an effort to go for a collaboration, which I was not very keen on doing it. Even right now, talking about it makes me emotional. It's a very sad story as such.
Okay, so I can see what makes you emotional and makes you sort of moist-eyed. What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? You make me laugh.
Oh, why?
Why? Because you come out with funny anecdotes, funny jokes, a rare sense of humor.
Thank you.
Fighting sometime?
Yeah, fighting a lot.
Biting.
Okay, so I think we'd like to have some questions from the audience.
Asha ji, during your time, you formed lasting friendships with people in your own profession, ladies especially. Why is it that today young female stars can't form those kind of friendships?
Asha ji, if you excuse me, I'll just interrupt here, because a few weeks back when we met in Pune, we were talking about, and you had mentioned about you went on a cruise with, I think, Bahida ji and Helen and all. And
yes.
Those, and you went before, I think you went to Scandinavia, you were mentioning.
Yeah, we went to Scandinavia.
Yeah. So just tell us, elaborating on her question, your relationships and why those are still existing or not existing in the younger generation.
Well, today's girls don't have the time because they're running from here to there. They're working in a film, then they're promoting the film. There's so much of media. There's so much of, too many things happening to them. I mean, they're going too fast, you know. So they don't have the time to be sitting idle. Even in our times, we didn't have that time. But when we used to meet in a very nice manner, very warm and very friendly. But we couldn't meet very often as we meet now. So we have the time now to sit and talk and go to see films, go and have lunches. So I think these people also may be wanting to be friends, but there's no time for them to be friends. That's what I feel.
Anyone else?
Just a minute.
After her.
Hi.
Hi.
It's been lovely to hear you speak. Thank you so much for your openness in your dialogue. My question is kind of around gender stereotypes and the double standard facing women in Bollywood. I mean, if we look at the discussion just today alone, we've had issues of nudity brought up, we've had whether or not you've fallen in love, we've had hugs, kisses, embraces, we've had whether your clothing is too tight or not. These are not questions that in my mind I feel a male actor would ever encounter.
I would ask a male the same thing.
I believe you.
No, I don't think that's fair, but anyway, you're entitled to your question, but don't deflect it on me, please.
These are just examples. I'm sure you encounter more.
It is a woman. I can't ask her about the question, but a male would get similar questions.
Of course.
Okay,
Perhaps.
The Shah Rukh Khan who would kiss once earlier, and he's all about kissing today, so I definitely ask him that.
Perhaps.
So that is a narrow view.
Okay, but speaking globally, I think it's been addressed that women in the film industry tend to receive a slightly different variety of questions than males do. And so my question to you, Ashaji, is how you deal with that and whether you've encountered it, what you think about that.
Well, it was always dominated by males. And this happened.
Question.
What question?
Like the approach of most people, not the industry. She's saying, okay, we ask you, sort of, by implication, she's saying sexist questions. Like, we're asking you chauvinist questions.
Chauvinistic questions, okay. Well, women are also doing certain things. Empowerment of women is there, and women are trying to come out with things. I don't think so. I'm going wrong. I don't know. I couldn't get her question correctly. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just to re-explain it, the kinds of questions that you've been receiving were today were, in my mind, I apologize, but in my mind, they were slightly different than what a man would receive in your position. I'm wondering what you've seen of how men are treated in Bollywood versus how women are treated in Bollywood, generally. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I said the male is always, I mean, in the Bombay film industry, the males rule the industry, right? So it's very difficult when women are there. They, how would I put it?
No, I think there are two questions in there. She's talking specifically about this evening and then relating it to the attitude of the film industry at large. Am I right?
Yeah, but that's not necessarily two questions.
Sorry?
They're not two questions. One is an
No. Shikan, I'm trying to explain it to her. I'm not giving you the answer.
No. It's not two separate questions, sir, with all due respect. I think it's one question, with tonight being an example of that question.
Okay, so can you ask her again, maybe?
I'm sorry, yeah, it was too complicated for me to understand what you were saying. Could you please repeat the question?
It's just generally speaking. Could you talk about what you faced as a woman, as opposed to as a male actor in Bollywood?
No, as such, I didn't face any problems with my male co-stars. I didn't have any problems as such, because a woman knows how to keep, if I know how to keep my dignity, I'm sure nobody can take advantage of me.
Who's next? Yeah, that gentleman. Oh, okay, so after.
Good evening, ma'am. My question to you is that, Miss, you're a very graceful lady, and in the 21st century, with growing westernization and a cultural evolution happening for young ladies everywhere, how do we preserve that sense of grace inside us?
Well, today I feel our culture is dying away. We are totally westernized. And I would love to see we getting back to where we were. Our culture is generally coming up. And you see the dances of today. Is it dances? Is it our dance? It's not our dance. Those are the dances which the Western people do. It's very good. I'm not saying they're bad or anything. But where is our culture? Where is our folk dances? Where is our classical dances? Where is our culture? So that's the thing which pains me. That's why I said I like women in saris. They look elegant.
Very well said, Ashaji. My question to you is, I'm very touched with your saying that you were running a hospital where it has to be closed on for lots of money and all that. But yesterday we had Mr. Shatrughan Sinha, who was here, and who was the cabinet minister, the health minister, and he said about that look, I am for the poor, and I'm going to start for the poor people, OPD. In the evening, there'll be these, will be open there. OPD means
He did when he was a health minister.
he was,
Not now.
no, but he said he did it that. But today you are saying it's not happening, but I think a lot of help can be achieved for that.
Yes, in the rural area, the government is doing a lot of work. I'm not saying that. What I'm talking about, the urban places where the poor people do not get proper medical aid. And our hospital was treating poor people and the white-collared people. Today, I feel miserable that we are not being able to do that because we are not getting donations which we used to get so easily, say 2 years back, 2 to 3 years back. It's just dried up.
Yes, that's right.
Ashaji, you continue to be so beautiful, graceful, and charming. So what are the secrets of keeping yourself so beautiful? And number two, what do you think about Narendra Modi? You are from Gujarat. So please tell us about Narendra Modi. What are your views on Narendra Modi? Thank you.
I think he's doing a fabulous job. He's trying to bring the country up. That's what everyone says, and I also think so. And whereas my beauty is concerned, I live happily, I enjoy life, and that's it.
Anyone else? The time is up. The last question.
In fact, I read your book, bought the copy, and liked it. In fact, your parents' love story was the best part.
Thank
and
you.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But, and of course your magnanimity, the way you were appreciating sadhana. But I think perhaps Khalid was helpful in that. If it was it or no, I do not know.
Yes,
because that's
Khalid.
what I make from a conversation. Because my husband wrote a book on sadhana, he's a great sadhana fan. And he wrote it as a fan. Well, that's different. And Sadhana ji spoke very high of you when we met her, and we were talking about the book. And you, in fact, wrote so beautifully about her. You were contemporaries, and so on. And there's a serial which is coming these days on Star World. It was there earlier on ABC. Betty and Joan. Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. I was wondering whether with the yesteryear heroines, maybe you and Sadhana ji, who were contemporaries of the film Laya, can something be made, and who would you think would be playing Asha and Sadhana in your places?
I think Betty Davis would be me.
No, who would be the young girls doing your roles when you were young?
Now,
Both you and Sadhana ji.
Okay. Alia Bhatt would be me, and Deepika would be Sadhana.
Oh. And well, I liked you in that Aja Aja song more, though the Chola Devi and the folk you did But you were talking about the Western. I think I became your fan when I saw you in Pastry Manzil.
Thank you.
Doing that song with Shami Kapoor.
Thank you.
Okay, you wanted to say something about your Kasauli Connect, right?
I had been to Simla for shooting of Firwoit and Laya Hu and Zakhmi, but never had the opportunity to come to Kasauli. Today I have had this opportunity to come here. It's a beautiful place, serene place, and I enjoyed being here in Kasauli. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashaji, for giving us this wonderful book, and definitely Khalid for approaching us for the book.
Ashaji, thank you very much for coming all the way.
I would like to say one more thing.
Yeah.
यूं तो हमने लाखों वसी देखे हैं, तुमसा नहीं देखा. A big round of
Ashaji, thank you very much. I know you were pressed for time and you came all the way to Bombay. It's been a long journey.
She came straight from the airport.
And you came straight from the airport and didn't even check into the hotel. But thank you very much. That was very nice of you. And I can assure you, everyone here was looking forward to your arrival, and we have really enjoyed the station. Khalid.
Thank you very much.
Khalid, thank you very much for making it all, making it happen. And Ajay, always thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, the last day of the fest, 10:30 in the morning we start, 10:30. Now please join us for dinner and drinks.
गिनीज बुक ऑफ रिकॉर्ड में नाम दर्ज कराना है, करवा देगा, नाम दर्ज करना है. Thank you all for watching.
When I saw you.
Manju's place is down the road.